Hello, and welcome to Module 1.1 of Oregon Third-Party Verification Training. This module presents an overview of our third-party verification program and details applicability requirements. For any questions related to this training program, please contact us at 3pverify@deq.oregon.gov. We'll begin today with some background on our third-party verification program. We'll cover our verification rules, verification basics, important dates and resources, and finally wrap up today with a discussion of how to determine third-party verification applicability for entities reporting to our greenhouse gas reporting and clean fuels programs. As a short disclaimer, the information presented in these slides does not replace your responsibility to know and abide by DEQ's third-party verification regulations. Please read the regulation, and if any information conflicts, the regulation takes precedence. Why does DEQ require third-party verification? For the state, third-party verification is a way to ensure the reliability of data produced by the greenhouse gas reporting and clean fuels programs, which in turn helps DEQ to track the progress of our state towards making its emission reduction targets, and to inform the development of future emission reduction policies. For responsible entities, third-party verification can help identify areas of risk and opportunity related to emissions, and can also help decrease their liability for incorrectly reported data. Third-party verification ensures a detailed, thorough, and independent review of data so that this data is useful to all. Third-party verification requirements are contained in Oregon Administrative Rule, Chapter 340, Division 272, which was adopted by DEQ in 2020 to establish third-party verification requirements for data submitted to the greenhouse gas reporting and clean fuels programs. This slide explains where to find particular requirements within the rule. A link to the rule itself is provided on DEQ's third-party verification website, which will be shown on the screen later in the presentation. A quick note about how our regulations refer to the parties involved in verification, as this differs somewhat from language used in other regulations. The third-party verification regulation refers to the responsible entity, which is a regulated entity reporting to either the greenhouse gas reporting or clean fuels programs that meets the requirements for third-party verification listed in OAR 340-272, or that voluntarily agrees to be subject to these requirements. They are also the point of regulation for the third-party verification program, which means that they can be subject to DEQ enforcement for failing to meet these requirements. The verification body is a DEQ-approved company hired by the responsible entity to conduct verification services for the entity's reported data. The responsible entity is responsible for engaging the services of a DEQ-approved verification body, making sure that all requirements in OAR 340-272 are met, and for ensuring that the verification statement is received by DEQ from their verification body by the required deadline. The verification process begins when the responsible entity contracts with a DEQ-approved verification body. The verification body manages a team of DEQ-approved verifiers who will conduct the verification after the entity attests to and submits their data to DEQ. They will produce a verification statement, which will be due to DEQ by the verification deadline. More on deadlines later in the presentation. This slide describes the composition of a verification team. The largest circle on the screen represents the verification body, which is the company hired by the entity to perform verification services. The second largest circle represents the verification team, a group of individuals assigned by the verification body to conduct the verification activities. The verification team contains a lead verifier, who is a DEQ-approved individual whose approval allows them to lead the verification team for the reporting type being verified. The lead verifier may be joined on the team by other individual verifiers who are also DEQ-approved, some of whom may be other sector-specific verifiers or subcontractors. Verifiers in training may also participate on verification teams. These individuals have not yet earned their own DEQ approval and participate on the team only under the direct supervision of the lead verifier at all times. Outside of the second largest circle is the independent reviewer. This is another DEQ approved lead verifier who works with the verification body but has not been involved with any of the verification activities undertaken by the team during the verification year. They serve as an internal check on the verification team's work before the verification statement is submitted. There are three possible outcomes for verification statements: positive, qualified positive, and adverse. Before we cover what these mean, it is important to understand the distinction between a nonconformance and a material misstatement. As defined by OAR Chapter 340, Division 272, a nonconformance is any instance where the responsible entity has failed to meet the requirements of the third-party verification rules or the requirements of the program to which they are reporting to calculate or report data or submit a fuel pathway application. A material misstatement is defined as a discrepancy, omission, misreporting, or aggregation of the three that leads the team conducting the verification to believe that the reported data or submitted report or fuel pathway application contains one or more errors, as described by the third-party verification rules. The unit of measurement varies based on the kind of reporting being verified, but in general, a material misstatement is an over- or understatement of 5% or more. Errors identified during the verification process that do not meet this threshold must still be corrected in order to avoid issuance of an adverse verification statement. Verification bodies prepare verification statements using the standard of reasonable assurance, which means that the verification body has a high degree of confidence in the accuracy and truth of a conclusion. For a positive verification statement, the verification body can say with reasonable assurance that the submitted report or fuel pathway application does not contain material misstatements or nonconformances with the applicable rules. For a qualified positive verification statement, the verification body can say with reasonable assurance that the submitted report or fuel pathway application does not contain material misstatements and that all correctable errors have been addressed. But there may still be one or more other nonconformances with the applicable rules, which do not result in material misstatement. For an adverse verification statement, either the verification body cannot say with reasonable assurance that the submitted report or fuel pathway application does not contain material misstatement, or that it contains correctable errors that have not been addressed and are therefore out of conformance with the applicable rules. The responsible entity must correct any identified correctable errors prior to submission of the verification statement in order to avoid issuance of an adverse statement. A correctable error is defined in the regulation as any error that impacts reported data, which is not the result of a reasonable method of rounding, truncation, or averaging. This slide covers reporting and verification deadlines for the clean fuels and greenhouse gas reporting programs. Though reporting deadlines vary by sector, all verification statements are due August 31st of each year, with one exception. Verification statements for electricity suppliers under the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program are due September 30th. These deadlines are also published on DEQ's third-party verification website. Verification takes place between the time the responsible entity submits its reporting to DEQ and the verification deadline. Now let's move on to resources and where to find them. If you haven't seen DEQ's third-party verification website before or haven't seen it recently, this is where you will be able to find a variety of verification resources throughout the year. You can type in Oregon third-party verification into a search engine, and this should pop up. Information specific to the clean fuels and greenhouse gas reporting programs will appear in the box for the associated program, and the resources box on the right is where you can find information that applies to both programs. Information here is broken out by group, so individual verifiers, verification bodies, and responsible entities can find the information most pertinent to them. Only verification bodies and verifiers who have been approved by DEQ may provide verification services in Oregon. Listings of these approvals are available under the Information for Responsible Entities link for the appropriate program from DEQ's main third-party verification page. Now that we've discussed resources, let's move on to third-party verification applicability. Thresholds for reporting requiring verification are outlined in detail in the third-party verification regulation, but just a note that applicability is determined based on the report as it is submitted as of the reporting deadline. This means that if corrections are made to the report later, this does not impact whether the report meets the verification threshold. For the Clean Fuels program, the first type of reporting that needs to be verified is quarterly fuel transaction reports. These are verified on an annual basis, though entities may opt to have their transaction reports reviewed by a verification body quarterly if desired. This is sometimes a good way to catch issues and correct them before an annual verification report is due to DEQ. Verification is required for the following transaction types: all liquid fuels, NGV fueling, and propane fueling. Entities that do not generate greater than or equal to 6,000 credits and deficits during the previous calendar year are exempt, regardless of transaction type. Entities may also qualify for exemption if they only report in one or more of the following transaction types: export, gain of inventory, loss of inventory, or not used for transportation, or if they did not report any liquid fuel as production in Oregon or import into Oregon, and they did not report any NGV fuel transactions. Related entities also need to aggregate their credits and deficits together when determining applicability. Related entities that share any amount of common ownership or operational control. The second type of reporting that requires verification is annual fuel pathway carbon intensity reporting. Each fuel pathway report submitted must undergo verification unless the holder of the approved fuel pathway does not generate greater than or equal to 6,000 credits and deficits during the previous calendar year for the quantity of fuel produced at a given facility. Oregon also allows the use of fuel pathways approved under California's Low Carbon Fuel Standard program, and holders of these fuel pathways must submit their California verification statements to DEQ. Now let's move on to 3PV applicability for the greenhouse gas reporting program. In general, any facility reporting 25,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent or more will need to have their reporting verified. This threshold includes vented emissions and fugitive emissions, but does not include carbon dioxide emissions from biomass-derived fuels. Any third party who is not the Bonneville Power Administration who submits an emissions data report on behalf of a consumer-owned utility must have the data verified for each individual utility that meets the threshold, excluding emissions from power purchased from BPA. Fuel suppliers and in-state fuel producers that are regulated entities or share common ownership or control must be aggregated when determining whether the exemption applies. As of the fall of 2023, all electricity companies and electricity service suppliers need to have their emissions verified, regardless of their emissions level. If an entity meets the threshold requiring verification of their reporting, the entire report must be verified, including emissions from biomass-derived fuels. A few exemptions do apply to the 3PV applicability for greenhouse gas reporting program. First, if the regulated entity reports emissions less than 25,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, excluding CO2 from biomass-derived fuels, they are exempt from verification. Other exemptions include municipal solid waste landfills. These emissions are covered by a different state regulation, interstate pipelines, and any emissions data report submitted by BPA when it is acting as a third-party reporter on behalf of a consumer-owned utility. The verification rules, OAR Chapter 340, Division 272, and the greenhouse gas reporting rules, OAR Chapter 340, Division 215, allow for cessation of reporting and verification subject to certain requirements. If the reporting entity drops below the applicability threshold, they must have their emissions data report verified for the first year that this is the case, but may stop having their reports verified thereafter. If their reported emissions rise above the applicability threshold in a subsequent year, the verification requirement would once again apply. Both the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program and the Clean Fuels Program allow for less intensive verification in certain circumstances. A less intensive verification includes all verification services with the exception of a site visit, and only requires data checks and document reviews based on the analysis and risk assessment in the most recent sampling plan, which would have been developed as part of the entity's most recent verification. Less intensive verification can take place for up to 2 years of every 3-year period if there has been no change in the entity's chosen verification body, a positive verification statement was issued in the prior year, and if there has been no change in operational control of the entity in the prior year, which includes acquisition of another company and reporting on its behalf. The verification body may still choose to perform full verification at its own discretion if there have been significant changes in emission sources or management systems. In certain cases, DEQ may set aside the originally submitted verification statement and require the responsible entity to have its reporting for that year re-verified by a different verification body. If this is the case, the responsible entity can continue to use its original verification body for its current year verification, unless that verification body has had its approval modified, suspended, or revoked by DEQ. This concludes Module 1.1. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions about the course, please email us at 3pverify@deq.oregon.gov.